true and woe. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna descends in this material world just to protect the pious and destroy the impious. That is his woe. The demigods could understand that Lord had taken his residence within the womb of Devaki in order to fulfill his woe. The demigods were very glad that the Lord was appearing to fulfill his mission, and they addressed him as Satyam Param, or the Supreme Absolute Truth. Everyone is searching after the truth. That is the philosophical way of life. The demigods give information that the Supreme Absolute Truth is Krishna. One who becomes fully Krishna conscious can attain the Absolute Truth. Krishna is the Absolute Truth. Relative truth is not truth in all the three phases of eternal time. Time is divided into past, present and future. Krishna is truth, always present, past, present and future. In the material world, everything is being controlled by supreme time in the course of past, present and future. But before creation, Krishna was existing, and when there is creation, everything is resting in Krishna. And when this creation is finished, Krishna will remain. Therefore, he is absolute truth in all circumstances. If there is any truth within the material world, it emanates from the supreme truth, Krishna. If there is any opulence within this material world, the cause of the opulence is Krishna. If there is any reputation within this material world, the cause of reputation is Krishna. If there is any strength within this material world, the cause of such strength is Krishna. If there is any wisdom and education within this material world, the cause of such wisdom and education is Krishna. Therefore, Krishna is the source of all relative truths. This material world is composed of 5 principal elements: earth, water, fire, air and ether. And all such elements are emanations from Krishna. So I just wanted to make a small point that here you can see Prabhupada has said that Krishna is the absolute truth. Relative truth is not truth in all the 3 phases of eternal time. So there is relative truth also, and there is absolute truth. Relative truth is the truth which is not actually dependent on Krishna. Like, for example, in this world, there is so many quarrels. There are so many quarrels going on everywhere. There is justice also. There is courtroom, and there is completely everywhere. People are doing something wrong and caught by the law and brought to the judge, and then the judge is giving a judgment that this is the truth. He murdered this person, so that is the truth. That is the relative truth. That is not the absolute truth. So the relative truths are many. There are many relative truths. If you say something very mundane, but it is true, that happened in the mundane world. But you think that the mundane truth is the actual truth, but it is not, because it is constantly changing and it is controlled by the 3 modes of material nature. So what happens in the control of 3 modes of material nature is the only absolute truth. It is not. It is only relative truth, and it is not absolute. So relative truths are many, but absolute truth is only one. And only those truths which actually are dependent completely and completely suggest the supremacy of Krishna is actually the absolute truth. Whatever you say in support of the supremacy of Krishna, that is absolute truth. So there are so many relative truths, but finally it's all untruth in this material world. Like whatever, because it's temporary. It is not actually. It doesn't have any continuity. It doesn't have any absolute nature. Because the person who is doing the activity with the body, with the mind, that itself is actually temporary, because the mind, body and everything is actually temporary. So it comes and it goes. So the person who is under the control of his the three modes of material nature and under the control of the body and thinks that he is the body and does activities and thinks that he has done it, that's foolishness. And even Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that what he says is that karta aham iti manyate, karta aham iti manyate. And those who think that I am the doer, they are in illusion. Although they are doing something, they consider that as a truth, that I am doing. But that is not truth, because it is not the body or the mind that is the final. It is the soul. So if you go to the plane of the soul, the activity of the soul is completely in connection with Krishna. Usually, it is said that Jivara Nitya Swarupa, Krishna Nitya Das. So in that connection, whatever the soul is doing, that is true. But in connection of 3 modes of material nature, this body, which is temporary, already temporary, and in that mode, if whatever activity happens, it is actually finally untruth. Even though it may be a relative truth, in the end it is actually temporary, it's untruth. That's what he is trying to say, is that one who becomes fully Krishna conscious can attain the absolute truth. Krishna is the absolute truth. Relative truth is not truth in all the three phases of eternal time. Time is divided into past, present and future. Krishna is truth always, past, present and future. So Krishna, whatever he does is actually eternal. Whatever he does is completely eternal, and it is not subjected to the time. It is always there. It's eternal. This material world is composed of 5 principal elements: earth, water, fire, air and ether. And all such elements are emanations from Krishna. The material scientists accept these primary 5 elements as the cause of material manifestation, but the elements in their gross and subtle states are produced by Krishna. The living entities who are working within this material world are also products of his marginal potency. In the 7th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, it is clearly stated that whole manifestation is a combination of 2 kinds of energies of Krishna, the superior energy and the inferior energy. The living entities are the superior energy, and the dead material elements are his inferior energy. In its dormant state, everything remains in Krishna. The demigods continue to offer their respectful prayers unto the supreme form of personality of Godhead, Krishna, by analytical study of the material manifestation. What is this material manifestation? It is just like a tree. A tree stands on the ground. Similarly, the tree of the material manifestation is standing on the ground of material nature. This material manifestation is compared to a tree because a tree is ultimately cut off in due course of time. A tree is called vriksha. Vriksha means that which will ultimately be cut off. Vriksha means that thing which will ultimately be cut off. Therefore, this tree of the material manifestation cannot be accepted as the ultimate truth. So that's what is what I summarized is the same thing. That the material manifestation cannot be accepted as the ultimate truth because everything is temporary. This material manifestation. The influence of time is on the material manifestation, but Krishna's body is eternal. He existed before the material manifestation. He is existing while the material manifestation is continuing, and when it will be dissolved, he will continue to exist. That is permanent. So even in yesterday, actually, when I and Rasika were going through some Guru Maharaj's lecture, even there Guru Maharaj actually is saying that we don't believe in the voting process. We don't actually vote in ashram. In our ashram, we don't vote. Why? Because when you vote, it creates automatically two parties. There is 2 parties automatically created. One party says for something, another party is objecting to it, basically. So there are 2 parties. So if you vote, then not all are happy. Everyone cannot be happy by vote, right? For example, if there is 100 people and then 60 people vote, then 40 people, 50, 60 people actually vote for something and they win. But what about the other 40%? They lose and they are not happy. So Guru Maharaj says that in ashrams, the voting process should never happen because voting does not give you give everyone they are not satisfied. Everyone is not satisfied. So Guru Maharaj said even if it takes long time in discussing, just discussion, not voting. Discussion till the consensus is reached, we should not take a decision basically. So that is the process of the saintly process. Saintly process means it should be discussed properly, and everyone should be on the same page with consensus, and then that means that Krishna has accepted that decision basically. So we are waiting for the absolute truth Krishna to manifest in the form of a consensus. So that is the real process of the saintly persons. They don't vote on something. They only try for consensus. They only try for more and more discussion and more clarity on the matter so that the real truth comes out. That is the real way of the saintly process. So there we are not talking about some absolute relative truth. We are waiting for the sanction from the absolute truth Krishna. Sanction from the absolute truth Krishna will manifest in due course of the discussion, and the consensus is reached like that. The demigods continued to say. The Katha Upanishad also cites this example of the tree of material manifestation. The Katha Upanishad also cites this example of the tree of material manifestation standing on the ground of material nature. This tree has 2 kinds of fruits, distress and happiness. Those who are living on the tree of the body are just like two birds. One bird is the localized aspect of Krishna known as the Paramatma, and the other bird is the living entity. The living entity is eating the fruits of this material manifestation. Sometimes he eats the fruit of happiness, and sometimes he eats the fruit of distress. But the other bird is not interested in eating the fruit of distress or happiness because he is self-satisfied. The Katha Upanishad states that one bird on the tree of the body is eating the fruits and the other bird is simply witnessing. The roots of this tree extend in three directions. This means that the root of the tree is the three modes of material nature: goodness, passion, and ignorance. Just as the tree's root expands, so by association of the modes of material nature, goodness, passion, and ignorance, one expands his duration of material existence. The tastes of the fruits are four kinds: religiosity, economic development, sense gratification, and ultimately liberation. That is dharma, artha, kama, and moksha. That is religiosity, economic development, sense gratification, and ultimately liberation. According to the different associations in three modes of material nature, the living entities are tasting different kinds of religiosity, different kinds of economic development, different kinds of sense gratification, and different kinds of liberation. Practically, all material work is performed in ignorance. But because there are three qualities, sometimes the quality of ignorance is covered by goodness or passion. The taste of these material fruits is accepted through five senses. So basically, actually, if you read the Bhagavatam, and if you read the creation process, and in the creation process, the first mode to appear is Tamoguna in the material world. Tamoguna first appears, and from Tamoguna, the Rajoguna and Sattva appears. So you can say as like everything is finally a tint of black in the material world. That which is very, very dark black, that is ignorance, and which is like little bit grey, that is passion, which is little bit lighter, that is goodness. But everything is black. So in the material world, either Tamo Guna, Rajoguna, or Sattva Guna are all material qualities only. So in the goodness, like in the morning, we feel some effects of the mode of goodness, because our mind is more clear, because we haven't started any activity, material activity. We are just waking up and we are just taking a bath, and then we are fresh in the morning. So it gives us a head start for the day. And then in the morning we can do some devotional activities, and it will be more potent than doing it in the afternoon or in the night. So mornings are very, very, very important aspect in our day. So morning should be, Guru Maharaj used to say that morning should be utilized very wisely, because you don't get much time in the morning. So the earlier you get up, the more time you get for devotional activities and for spiritual activities. So, and you have to make sure that time should be utilized very, very well, very wisely. So it should be, at least the morning time should be divided so that you do what is more important, and then the rest of the day will continue after that. So this goodness, the mode of goodness is very strong in the morning. So you can utilize it and then use it for devotional service. But ultimately, all these three modes are actually will bind you. So we have our goal is to transcend these three modes and go to the plane of Sattva Guna, Shuddha Sattva. Shuddha Sattva is that mode which is above the material modes. It is actually the spiritual mode of goodness. That is Shuddha Sattva. Totally pure. It has no tinge of any material aspect is not there in that. So that is the goal of Krishna consciousness also. It's one of the first stepping stones of Krishna consciousness. Okay. The taste of these material fruits is accepted through five senses. The five sense organs through which knowledge is acquired are subjected to six kinds of whips: lamentation, illusion, infirmity, death, hunger, and thirst. This material body, or the material manifestation, is covered by 7 layers: skin, muscle, flesh, marrow, bone, fat, and semen. The branches of the tree are 8: earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and ego. These are the 8 material elements, physical material elements. 3 subtle material elements, then 5 gross material elements. There are 9 gates in this body: the 2 eyes, 2 nostrils, 2 ears, 1 mouth, 1 genital, 1 rectum. And there are 10 kinds of internal air passing within the body: prana, apana, udana, vyana, samana, etc. The 2 birds seated in the tree, as explained above, are the living entity and the localized Supreme Personality of Godhead. The root cause of the material manifestation described here is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Supreme Personality of Godhead expands himself and takes charge of the three qualities of material world. Vishnu takes charge of the mode of goodness, Brahma takes charge of the mode of passion, and Lord Shiva takes charge of the mode of ignorance. Brahma, by the mode of passion, creates this manifestation. Lord Vishnu maintains this manifestation by the mode of goodness, and Lord Shiva annihilates it by the mode of ignorance. The whole creation ultimately rests in the Supreme Lord. He is the cause of creation, maintenance, and dissolution, and when the whole manifestation is dissolved in its subtle form as the energy of the Lord, it rests within the body of the Supreme Lord. At the present, the demigods prayed, the Supreme Lord Krishna is appearing just for the maintenance of this manifestation. Actually, the Supreme Cause is one, but being deluded by the three modes of material nature, less intelligent persons see that the material world is manifested through different causes. Those who are intelligent can see that the cause is one, Krishna. As it is stated in the Brahma Samhita, Sarva Karana Karanam, Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is the cause of all causes. Brahma is the deputed agent for creation. Vishnu is the expansion of Krishna for the maintenance, and Lord Shiva is the expansion of Krishna for dissolution. Our dear Lord, the demigods prayed, it is very difficult to understand your eternal form of personality. People in general are unable to understand your actual form. Therefore, you are personally descending to exhibit your original eternal form. Somehow, people can understand the different incarnations of your Lordship, but they are puzzled to understand the eternal form of Krishna with two hands, moving among human beings exactly like one of them. This eternal form of your Lordship is ever increasing in transcendental pleasure for the devotees. But for the non-devotees, this form is very dangerous. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is very pleasing to the sadhu. It is said, Paritranaya sadhunam. But this form is very dangerous for the demons, because Krishna also descends to kill the demons. He is therefore simultaneously pleasing to the devotees and dangerous to the demons. So here Prabhupada is just giving a summary of the creation process, like who is in charge of what in this material world. So if you can see, this material world is has like millions of universes. As many, it's said in the Bhagavatam that in a bucket, how much you can hold mustard seeds, that many universes are floating around in this material world. Many universes. And from the spiritual world, the first expansion in the material world is the Karanodakashayi Vishnu. Karanodakashayi Vishnu is the Vishnu form which is sleeping in the Karana ocean. And from him, actually, the expansion of the Garbhodakashayi Vishnu comes. Garbhodakashayi Vishnu is in charge of each and every universes. Small universes is there now. There are millions of universes, and each and every universes, the controller is the Garbhodakashayi Vishnu. And from that Garbhodakashayi Vishnu, from the abdomen of the Garbhodakashayi Vishnu, lotus flower comes out. From there the Brahma comes. So Brahma is each and every universe has a Brahma, and that Brahma is interested with the creation process, and then he creates, and then Supreme Lord is the Paramatma, that is the Kshirodakashayi Vishnu. Kshirodakashayi Vishnu is the Paramatma. So there are three primary expansions, functional expansions of Vishnu. One is the Karanodakashayi Vishnu, and the second is Garbhodakashayi Vishnu in each and every material universe, and in each and every atoms there is Kshirodakashayi Vishnu, that is the Paramatma. So in this way, Vishnu expands all through the material universe. So that is the expansions of Vishnu. And each and every universe has a Brahma. Each and every universe has different headed Brahma, not only four-headed. Four-headed is in this universe, but there are multiple headed Brahmas in different universes, and very varied creation. And but that's the reason, like when Prabhupada says that it's very difficult for people to understand Krishna, because Krishna is very like a human being. Like you can see him as a two-handed form, Krishna, very beautiful, but finally he has two-handed forms and does a lot of activities which are very human-like. So in the Bhagavatam it is said that for the Gnanis, Ittam Satam Brahma Sukhanubhutya, means for the Gnanis, Krishna appears as the Supreme Brahman, that Brahma Jyoti. The Gnanis see Krishna as the Brahma Jyoti, as the homogeneous Brahma Jyoti. It's impersonal aspect of Krishna for the Gnanis. For the Vishnu Bhaktas, for the devotees, for the Dasya devotees, they see Krishna as a supreme lord, as God basically. Dasyam Gatanam Paradaivatena, as for example these Ramanuja Charya Sampradaya, they see Vishnu as the supreme God. For them Vishnu is the God. So they are the servants and Vishnu is the God. But Dasyam Gatanam Paradaivatena Maya Shritanam Naradarakena. But those who are like under the spell of Maya, for them Krishna appears as if just as a child of a man, human child, that's all. They don't see anything more than that. They don't see the Brahman, they don't see Krishna as God or something. They just see him as just a two-handed human child. So for those who are under the spell of Maya. So Maya Shritanam Naradarakena Sakam Vijaru Krita Punya Punja. But actually the wonderful aspect is that even those who are not under Maya, those are friends of Krishna, those who are under actually Yoga Maya, they also see Krishna as not God but as their own friend, as a two-handed form Krishna, as their own friend. So even you can say that Krishna is actually appears for the materialist, for those under a spell of Maya as human child, and for those who are under Yoga Maya, for even them for two-handed child, and they don't think of Krishna as some god or something, as Vishnu. So that is a very special aspect of Krishna, and that is a very confusing aspect of Krishna also. People get confused very easily. No one could recognize Krishna on the battlefield, Kurukshetra. There were so many people are fighting Krishna. They think that he is just one more prince. There is Shishupala, Tantavakra attacking Krishna. So many people, even if Krishna is in front of them, they are just envious of him. They think that he is just a cheater. They think that he is just a coward, runs away from battlefield. So many things they think, but they don't think that he is the Supreme Lord. So actually in the Kurukshetra, even when Krishna expanded as a Vishwarupa, Arjuna was very afraid, and then he is a devotee. So he actually prayed for Krishna to return to his Shyamasundar aspect, two-handed form, which is most beautiful for the devotee. So devotees can understand Krishna, the two-handed form of Krishna, very, very well, and the devotees can appreciate it very well, and Krishna appears very beautiful in that form. For the demons, Krishna is the most dangerous person, as Prabhupada is saying. So actually in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is very pleasing to the sadhu. It is said, Paritranaya sadhunam. But this form is very dangerous for the demons, because Krishna also descends to kill the demons. He is therefore simultaneously pleasing to the devotees and dangerous to the demons. Our dear lotus-eyed Lord, you are the source of pure goodness. There are many great sages who simply by samadhi or transcendentally meditating upon your lotus feet and thus being absorbed in your thought have easily transformed the great ocean of nations created by the material nature to no more than water in a calf's hoof print. The purpose of meditation is to focus the mind upon the personality of Godhead, beginning from his lotus feet. Simply by meditation on the lotus feet of the Lord, great sages cross over this vast ocean of material existence without difficulty. O self-illuminated one, the great saintly persons who have crossed over the ocean of nations by the help of the transcendental boat of your lotus feet have not taken away the boat. It is still lying on this side. The demigods are using a nice simile. If one takes a boat to cross a river, the boat also goes with one to the other side of the river. And so, when one reaches the destination, how can the same boat be available to those who are still on the other side? To answer this difficulty, the demigods say in their prayer that the boat is not taken away. The devotees still remaining on the other side are able to pass over the ocean of material nature because the pure devotees do not take the boat with them when they cross over. When one simply approaches the boat, the whole ocean of material nations is reduced to the size of water in a calf's hoof print. Therefore, the devotees do not need to take a boat to the other side. They simply cross the ocean immediately. Because the great saintly persons are compassionate towards all conditioned souls, the boat is still lying at the lotus feet of the Lord. One can meditate upon his feet at any time, and by so doing, one can cross over the great ocean of material existence. Meditation means concentration upon the lotus. So did you understand this simile? Or it is confusing? What he is saying is that the Lord's lotus feet is the boat. And if you meditate on that lotus feet, which is the boat, then the whole material, the ocean, becomes as equal to a small puddle of water. It's made by the calf's hoof print. The calf makes a hoof print, and under that some water is stored. So material existence, material universe becomes so small, and then you can easily cross over. So the boat is always here because it's the Lord's lotus feet. But just by meditating on lotus feet, it's not that you use that material, use that lotus feet to cross over the material ocean. It's not like that. By meditating on the lotus feet, the whole ocean becomes like very easy to cross over, and you just cross over. So the boat is always here. So that's the simile trying to provide here. Meditation means concentration upon the lotus feet of the Lord. Lotus feet indicates the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Those who are impersonalists do not recognize the lotus feet of the Lord, and therefore their object of meditation is something impersonal. The demigods express their mature verdict that persons who are interested in meditating on something void or impersonal cannot cross over the ocean of nations. So these people who are actually meditating on the void are actually trying to cross by their own force. That is the difference. This material ocean, they are trying to cross by their own strength or swimming strength. I have a lot of strength, I'll use it and I cross this material ocean. They are doing it, but they are unable to do it. In the end, what happens is even though they get to the border of the material universe, even though they reach the border of the whole material ocean, because they actually disregard the lotus feet of the Lord, they just fall down again. The currents just push them back eventually. That's what happens because they did not hold to the lotus feet of the Lord, hold on to the lotus feet of the Lord. So they don't have any support, even though they are trying to maintain their position by their own strength. But eventually, the great ocean of the waves of the material ocean, it just pushes them back to the material world. Even though they try to hold on their position for some time, but even then they are pushed back because they are not actually holding onto the lotus feet of the Lord, which is actually the eternal refuge for all devotees. So they are actually at a loss, even though they are trying very hard. The demigods express such persons are simply imagining that they have become liberated. So that is just their imagination. O lotus-eyed Lord, their intelligence is contaminated because they fail to meditate upon the lotus feet of your Lordship. As a result of the neglectful activity, the impersonalists fall down again into the material way of conditioned life, although they may temporarily rise to the point of impersonal realization. Impersonalists, after undergoing severe austerities and penances, merge themselves into the Brahman effulgence or impersonal Brahman existence, but their minds are not free from material contamination. They have simply tried to negate the material ways of thinking. That does not mean that they have become liberated. Thus they fall down. In the Bhagavad Gita, it is stated that impersonalist has to undergo great tribulation in realizing the ultimate goal. So Sridhar Maharaj says that there is three planes of life. One plane is the plane of exploitation, where you exploit the material world. One plane is plane of exploitation, and one plane is plane of renunciation. Plane of renunciation means you don't exploit, you don't do anything, you don't engage in material activity. That is plane of renunciation. And the other third plane is the plane of dedication, where you dedicate whatever you have for the service of the Lord. So these are the three planes of life. So these impersonalists, they are actually renunciationists. They just believe in renunciation of the material activities, but eventually they cannot leave the material activities. Eventually they are again pulled back. So these three planes are you can divide all the planes of life in these three planes. One is exploitation, one is dedication, and one is renunciation. But their minds are not free from material contamination. They have simply tried to negate the material ways of thinking. That does not mean that they have become liberated. Thus they fall down. In the Bhagavad Gita, it is stated that the impersonalist has to undergo great tribulation in realizing the ultimate goal. At the beginning of the Srimad Bhagavatam, it is also stated that without devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one cannot achieve liberation from the bondage of fruitive activities. The statement of Lord Krishna is there in the Bhagavad Gita, and in the Srimad Bhagavatam, the statement of the great sage Narada is there, and here also the demigods confirm it. Persons who have not taken to devotional service are understood to have become short of the ultimate purpose of knowledge and are not favored by your grace. The impersonalists may think that they are liberated, but actually they have no feeling for the personality of God. So there is no feeling in their heart because they almost become like a void. Even the Buddhists try to become void. But the Shankarites try to merge in the impersonal aspect of the Supreme. But the Buddhists actually try to become void. So these people have no feelings for the Lord. They actually negate feeling. They push the feelings down. They think that feeling means material attachment. They think that devotional service means sentiment. They think that only Gnana can liberate. Only the study of the Vedas and Gnana and just meditation, Dhyana, and then removing your mind from material activities will liberate them. But actually, they are at a loss because finally they are again pushed back to the material world. So they therefore, they think that when Krishna comes, okay, the impersonalists simply think that they are liberated, but actually they have no feeling for the personality of Godhead. They think that when Krishna comes into the material world, he accepts a material body. They therefore overlook the transcendental body of Krishna. This is also confirmed in Bhagavad Gita. Avajananti ma mudha. In spite of conquering material lust and rising to the point of liberation, the impersonalists fall down. If they are engaged just in knowing things for the sake of knowledge and do not take to the devotional service of the Lord, they cannot achieve the desired result. So they use knowledge as the end, but knowledge is actually not the end. So knowledge is just the means, but they think that the knowledge will give them the end, but it is just a means to bhakti. Through knowledge, you actually come to the plane of bhakti, because bhakti is higher. The karma, gnana, everything finally leads to bhakti, should lead to bhakti in an ideal setup. Their achievement is the trouble they take, and that is all. It is clearly stated in Bhagavad Gita that to realize Brahman identification is not all. Brahman identification may help one become joyful without material attachment or detachment and to achieve the platform of equanimity. But after this stage, one has to take to devotional service. When one takes to devotional service after being elevated to platform of Brahman realization, he is then admitted into the spiritual kingdom for the permanent residence in association with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is the result of devotional service. Those who are devotees of the Supreme Personality of Godhead never fall down like the impersonalists. Even if the devotees fall down, they remain affectionately attached to their Lord. So even if the devotees fall down, they remain affectionately attached to their Lord. They can meet all kinds of obstacles on the path of devotional service, and freely, without any fear, they can surmount such obstacles because of their surrender. They are certain that Krishna will always protect them. As it is promised by Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, my devotees are never vanquished. So whatever effort we put in the service of Krishna is actually eternal. It's always there in our in our merit. Because whatever effort has been put in Krishna's direction is the real effort. It will never go to waste. But whatever effort you put for the for gnana or karma, it eventually does not help you in any way. He said, Naishkarmyam apyachyuta bhava varjitam. Api achyuta bhava varjitam. Naishkarmyam api achyuta bhava varjitam. Means without considering the Supreme Lord, if you do whatever activity, or if you don't do any activity, Naishkarmyam, you don't do any activity, just sit and do meditation, and you are just free from all activities. But you don't have feeling for Krishna. Naishkarmyam apyachyuta bhava varjitam. Na shobhate gnana malam niranjanam. So it doesn't actually benefit you in any way. It doesn't actually, it's not real gnana. Nashobhate gnana malam niranjanam. Because the real knowledge is utilized in the service of Krishna. So gnana malam niranjanam in that way. So kuta puna shashvata bhattram ishvare karmaya dapya karanam. So what to speak of karma? These karmic activities in this material world, which actually is just puts you in a cycle of the samsara. So, what to speak of the just karma or activities in the materialistic activities, even knowledge which is not used for the service of the Supreme Lord is waste. It is completely, in the end, it will not give you any eternal benefit. So, only eternal benefit is the devotional service to Krishna. And in that direction, whatever effort you put is a positive progress. Even if you come back, that progress is always registered with Krishna. So, in that way, even if devotees fall down, it is said, Jata Shraddha Mat Kathasu Nirvanna Sarva Karmashu, it is said, Jata Shraddha Mat Kathasu, even the devotee who has full faith in the glorification, in the supremacy of the Supreme Lord, in the stories of the Supreme, full faith in the Supreme Lord. For him, Jata Shraddha Mat Kathasu Nirvinna Sarva Karmashu, even though he has material qualities, even though he has material attachments, even if he falls down, even then he is given a chance in the devotional service. Even then he is given a chance. Because he has the positive faith in the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and that never goes away. Even if he falls down, he has always another chance. He is always given another chance, and at one point he will cross over the material ocean. So whatever effort you put in devotional service is a positive effort. It will never go to waste. Even Krishna has confirmed it in Bhagavad Gita that the devotees who cannot make it to me in this lifetime, in the next lifetime, they will be given another chance in a better family. in a family of a yogi or family of a well-placed person in the society. So that assurance Krishna has already given, and Krishna also says that my devotees are never vanquished. They are always with him. He is always helping them. So they are never vanquished actually. They are always in the minds of Krishna, in the mind of Krishna. So I'll stop here. Any question? Anyone? These are actually a lot of points put in a concise paragraph. There are a lot of things here to understand.
So Maharaj, like we have Brahma for every planet, every universe, right?
Yeah.
Do we have Shiva also for every planet?
No.
So who is there?
Shiva is only
So
one.
who is there for
one
the annihilation?
Huh?
So who is there as a destroyer, or who can inherit the other planets? Who can that in other planets? Like in this planet, Shiva is there.
Yeah.
So on another universe, on another planet,
Yeah.
who will do this job of annihilation the planet?
Shiva will only do.
But you are saying
It's
Shiva is
Shiva.
not there.
Shiva is one, but because Shiva Tattva is one, because he is finally Vishnu. Brahma is actually a Jiva.
Correct.
So Shiva is only one, and he is actually one aspect of Vishnu in the material world.
So in that case, the Shiva should be present in other planets. On the
Yeah, Shiva is one, Prabhu.
Shiva is one,
One.
but the same Shiva should be present in other planets.
Yes. That's how my understanding is. And Shiva Tattva is very difficult to understand, as Sridhar Maharaj himself comes
So this one Shiva present in this planet,
from. This
and
universe.
this universe,
Yeah.
and the Shiva planet present in the other universe, both are same Shiva, right?
Same Shiva is. They are not two different Jivas. Because he is Shiva. Shiva is finally Vishnu Tattva. He is Vishnu Tattva.
Finally.
Because it said as you know the yogurt comes from milk. The milk curdles and forms yogurt. That is Shiva. Milk is the Vishnu and yogurt is Shiva. So in constitution they are same,
Right.
but form they are different. Like that. But Shiva Tattva is definitely very difficult to understand, because Shiva is, there are two aspects of Shiva. One is the Rudra Shiva, which is there for the as the leader of Tamoguna, as the leader of Tamoguna, and for the annihilation of the universe is there. That is one aspect of Shiva. And another aspect is the Sadashiva. Sadashiva is the devotee Shiva. So for us it is always very difficult to understand the Shiva Tattva in that way.